This area of interest has continued to show more and more signs of organization as more model guidance has continued to come through, and we're seeing more concerning shifts with the models. With each run, each one seems to be going further and further to the west, which if you are tuning in from the Lesser Antilles, you're going to want to start paying attention to, because now more model guidance, particularly the ensembles, are showing more of a likely chance that you guys could see some pretty big impacts from this. So in this video, we're going to be going over everything you need to know about this area of interest. So here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. Our current area of interest that is moving through much of the main development region is slowly but surely getting its act together. You're starting to see more convection starting to pop up around the center of circulation, at least where the rotation is, and you're starting to see more and more of these models shifting it further to the west. So we're going to be talking about that as the NHC also increased the chances from yesterday to now a 70% chance of formation. So with that being said, we're going to start with the NHC, then go through some model data, and then we'll talk about the conditions towards the end of the video. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into it. So here is your NHC advisory. We're watching two areas of interest in the Atlantic. This area of interest over here that's closer to the Antilles, this was kind of our sacrificial lamb that we were looking at earlier. That's kind of now has a 0% chance. They'll probably be gone by the time this video comes out. But here's what we have with this right here. We now have a 70% chance of development over here. We're going to have to pay attention to this. Let's go ahead and read it out. Shower and thunderstorm activity is currently limited in association with an area of low pressure located about 500 miles southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. Environmental conditions are forecast to become more conducive for development during the next couple of days, and a tropical depression will likely form during the latter half of this week while the system moves westward to west-northwestward across the tropical Atlantic. 30% chance of formation in the next 48 hours, 70% in the next 7 days. So that's our situation that we are looking at. Conditions are only expected to get better and better as time has continued to progress. And you're also being helped with the fact that you have more moisture in the atmosphere now due to the tropical wave that is in front of it. So that's just something to pay attention to. Also keeping an eye on our area of interest over here to the north that has a 10% chance of development in the subtropics. Time is starting to run out a little bit in terms of tropical development over here, but let's go ahead and read it out. A trough of low pressure located several hundred miles northeast of Bermuda is producing showers and thunderstorms. Some development of this system is possible during the next day or so while it moves eastward at around 20 miles per hour across the central subtropical Atlantic. The system is forecast to reach cooler waters later this week, ending its chances of formation by Thursday. 10% chance in the next 48 hours, 10% in the next 7 days. So that's the situation that we have going on in the Atlantic. Definitely things are starting to heat up a little bit, particularly with our main development region area of interest over there. So we're going to look at some satellite imagery just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. So here is our imagery. Let's go ahead and go to the eastern Atlantic and then just to first, and then we'll go to the central Atlantic. Here's what we have. This is our area of interest over here, a bit further to the west, southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. You have a tropical wave coming off the coast of Africa right now, producing more moisture. This wave is not expected to develop behind it. I want to make that explicitly clear. This system is not expected to develop that is behind the area of interest. I wouldn't be surprised if they designate this area of interest in invest soon because this is getting more organized. You're starting to see some more convection, at least starting to get around parts of the center over here, at least starting to get a bit closer to it. As a matter of fact, you're seeing some more increased convection, some more deep convection that is starting to move a bit further to the northwest, more so westerly. It's based in terms of where the rotation, at least the center of the rotation is. At this current point in time, this area of convection is still fighting right here, albeit it is continuing to kind of weaken and level off a little bit, more so being isolated and more so being concentrated, that is, rather, into parts of where the center is over here. So definitely an interesting sign of organization. Also seeing increased spin and increased concentration with that as well as time continues to go on. But let's also pull up the water vapor imagery because this is going to be the most important thing I show you right now. So here is our water vapor imagery, and the reason this is kind of important, and I will show you why as we zoom over to the central Atlantic in just a second, is because what's going on with this burst of convection as well as this wave is it's producing more moisture and it's moistening up the atmosphere ahead of this system. This is also important because the tropical wave behind it is moistening up the atmosphere behind it. So what you kind of are seeing right here is a scenario where you have two tropical waves that are kind of sandwiched, with this one rather sandwiched in between it, and then you have a situation where this further to the east is going to moisten the atmosphere behind it, and this further to the west, and we'll go ahead and show you that angle right now, is going to moisten the atmosphere ahead of it. This is our sacrificial lamb that we've been talking about. You're seeing a much more moist environment now than what you've seen previously. That's what's going to be ahead of the system. That's why the NHC is saying conditions are going to be more conducive for development, because you're going to have a little bit lower wind shear and you're going to have more moisture to work with than what a lot of the earlier models were previously forecasting for. When you have that on top of increased convection, especially getting closer to the center and starting to see more and more of this rotation, that's when you start seeing your invest starting to show up, and that's when you start seeing more scenarios where tropical development becomes increasingly likely, as we have seen over the last couple of days. The question now is how strong could this get? Does anyone get impacted by this? And we've seen more concerning signs of this potentially heading towards land, and what could ultimately happen as a result of this. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into the ensembles, and we'll go ahead and get started. So starting off, here is the European ensembles. Let's just go ahead and start in the next 24 hours and work our way over. Next 24 hours, not too much is expected to happen right there. It's still organizing, it's still developing. This system is going to take its time to get together. From what I've seen with satellite and from what I've been seeing on the observations, this system is going to take its time. The thing is, though, it has plenty of time. It has time on its side to get its act together. There's no time limit with this. Well, kind of there is, but that doesn't happen for a while. But here's the situation that we got going on. In the next 48 hours, you start seeing more of the power numbers starting to increase over here. You're starting to see a situation where things start going off a little bit. You're starting to see maybe some more organization going on in the next 48 hours. This system is moving due west at this current point as well, so it's going to be staying well within that moisture pocket that the wave ahead of it and the wave behind it is going to be producing for it. Let's go ahead and show you what's going on in the next 72 hours. Next 72 hours, a bit more concentrated of a signal. You're starting to see more organization, potentially more signs of development with the ensembles as it starts to move a bit closer towards the Antilles over here. You're starting to get towards those regions as well. I will tell you this, it's still looking a bit more likely that this does turn out towards sea, but I've been watching the models. They've been shifting further and further and further to the west, potentially impacting the Lesser Antilles, potentially looking at even a bit further to the west than that. The trade-off to that, and I'm just going to preface this by saying that the trade-off to that is the further west this goes, if this heads into the Caribbean, it's going to be significantly weaker due to wind shear, but if it stays around the Lesser Antilles or moves out to sea, it's going to be significantly stronger. So I just wanted to go ahead and preface that. So ultimately, weaker but more impacts, but versus stronger and less impacts. And we can go ahead and show you those ensembles. Starting 96 hours out, you're seeing the power numbers starting to increase, but a bit of a shift further up to the north. Some ensembles, a decent minority of them, have it further to the south as well. So definitely a bit of a split, not a big split, but a split regardless. And then as we go ahead and go to, we really start exacerbating this, you really start seeing the power numbers, especially further up to the north, 985, 1001, 999. The tropical storm to potentially weak hurricane scenarios over here are further to the north, whereas the weaker scenarios stay further to the south and impact parts of the Windward Islands. So that's just a bit of a split that I have noticed right here from what I've seen with the latest shifts. 144 hours out, you're definitely noticing a lot of these ensembles that do enter the Caribbean kind of weaken due to wind shear, but a good majority of the ensembles still have this moving further to the north. If you're tuning in from the Lesser Antilles, a good amount of these ensembles are impacting you guys. You're going to want to take this kind of seriously. I want to wait and see an extra day how this is going to trend out, because this is still 6 days out. We have plenty of time to figure out what's going on, but you are looking at an increasing sign of this system going, okay, we might see some impacts in parts of the Antilles, and then we might go out to sea. That's kind of what I'm looking at. This is kind of giving me an Aaron type of situation in terms of not the power, because that was a Category 5 hurricane. This has nowhere near that ceiling, but in terms of its track, where there was some uncertainties, because Aaron was intensifying so quickly, it was pumping out the ridge and just shifting further and further and further to the west. And I remember each shift further to the west stressed me out more because of the potential impacts it heads towards land. It didn't make landfall or anything like that, but because of it was such a close call, I just remember that kind of stressing me out, and this is kind of giving me a similar situation to what I'm seeing earlier, so we'll have to pay attention to that. Let's go ahead and skip an extra 48 hours out. So ultimately, as time progresses, as this system enters the Atlantic Basin, the power numbers, according to the European, really start ramping up over here. If it stays in the Atlantic Basin, it's going to potentially take advantage of those warm waters. There's less shear to work with than the belt of shear that we have talked about ad nauseum over here. And then you start tapping into the power potential, where the European ensembles are showing potentially a strong hurricane out of this. At least a lot of them are. We'll have to pay attention to it. I am taking this kind of seriously, but we will have to keep an eye on it. I will monitor the situation as time continues to go on. But let's go ahead and go to 10 days out. Yeah, you're definitely seeing a lot more power with a lot of these ensembles here. A lot of the ensembles, though, are potentially having this impacting the Antilles, potentially moving a bit further to the west as well. One ensemble, this is an outlier, by the way, is heading toward the Bahamas right here, but the majority of them either have it impacting the Leeward Islands or staying out to sea, with the trade-off being there's more power with some of this as well. So that's what you have with the European ensembles. Let's go ahead and show you the AI and then the rest of them as well. So here is your European AI ensemble suite right here. It's definitely not showing as strong of an ensemble suite as the European operational is, but the AI model is showing that basically further to the north, you're seeing your increase in power. Further to the south, running into the Caribbean, you run into the graveyard of shear. You are seeing a good minority, though, of these ensembles starting to impact parts of the Lesser Antilles. Kind of more so the middle ground scenario from what I have seen according to the AI run right here. Definitely an interesting situation we're going to want to keep an eye on and watch out for. Let's go ahead and show you the GFS now. And here is the GFS. The GFS is more so supporting the system staying out to sea, albeit you are seeing an increase in power with a few of these ensembles as well. Not nearly as to the extent as the European. The European has definitely been the aggressive model of the season. It's been the aggressive model. It was like this in 2024, and it's kind of resorted to this back in 2026. The GFS being conservative is definitely not something I would typically see on my bingo card right here. So it's definitely intriguing to watch, but ultimately kind of agreeing with the European in terms of track, disagreeing in terms of the intensity. Let's go ahead and go to the Google DeepMind for you guys right here. And here is the Google DeepMind that I am seeing at this current point. Here's what we're looking at, and this is something we're going to want to watch out for. You're seeing a split in the models. One split has it going out to sea, albeit the power numbers really substantially increase with this. The other scenario over here is it's not as strong, but it brings more impacts to the Lesser Antilles. So let's go ahead and run this out to 10 days because that's 8 days out. Definitely an intriguing situation over here with the Google DeepMind. The system is forecast to start moving a bit further to the west, potentially heading towards, I just want to go ahead and see what this ends up doing just for my curiosity 2 weeks out. Okay, yeah, it kind of just breaks up all over the place after 10 days out, so I'm not going to really jump to any conclusions with this, but 10 days out, the system continues to move further to the west, a bit further to the west than a lot of the other models are showing right here. The European AI has this moving out to sea. The GFS moves it out to sea. The European impacts the Antilles potentially and moves it out to sea. But the Google DeepMind continues to shift further to the west over here with this scenario. And I'm starting to get a little bit more concerned with this because the DeepMind's definitely been the one to watch, especially over the last couple of seasons with the ensemble suites that we have. So that's what we have right here. What's the GENC showing with this as well? Definitely okay, let's go ahead and go back to 10 days out with this. Definitely a bit all over the place. The signal is still there, but this is continued to be the most conservative model out of the bunch. You are seeing more ensembles picking it up, but you aren't seeing as much power as the Google DeepMind FNV3 and the European is showing. So definitely a bit of a discrepancy right here. Let's see how this works out with the operational. So we're pulling up the operational for you guys right here. Here is the European operational that we have right here. This is the 0Z. The system slowly gets its act together, organizes, and potentially gets up to at least a tropical depression, maybe tropical storm status before moving towards parts of the Antilles. The European 0Z operational actually has this heading towards areas like Guadalupe, Dominica, and those areas before moving through parts of the Leeward Islands. It does enter the northeastern Caribbean right here. So it does start running into this wind shear right here before moving through parts of Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and dissipating from there. So definitely an interesting situation from what I've seen previously right there. So you're going to want to pay attention to it. Ultimately, if this does do that track, it would ultimately wreck its potential chances for it being a very strong storm, which there's a bit of a trade-off. You're looking at maybe tropical storm impacts for parts of the Antilles instead of maybe a big hurricane, at least in terms of the ceiling we're seeing that stays out to sea. So definitely an intriguing situation, at least from what we've seen with the operational runs. The ensembles definitely have shifted further to the west, but they haven't shifted that far to the west. So I'm curious to see over the next day or so, how are the ensembles going to respond? Are they going to double down and maybe the staying out to sea or a close impact? Or are they going to start caving and moving further to the west? Because if we start seeing that, then that's going to potentially cause problems for a lot of people in the Caribbean and a lot of people in the Antilles. So that's what we're seeing with the Europeans run. Let's go ahead and show you the GFS. Here is the 0Z GFS for you guys right here. System starts getting its act together relatively quickly, as a matter of fact. You're looking at about 4 days out. So this will be by Thursday night, according to when this ran, the 0Z. You have a 1,007 millibar system, potentially a tropical storm moving through parts of the main development region. It does stay out to sea. The GFS is a bit further to the north, stays out to sea, and then it does start to increase in power. It starts increasing to potentially hurricane strength as it moves through parts of the subtropical Atlantic near Bermuda, as a matter of fact. And the GFS actually gets up to potentially a Category 1 hurricane at one point before starting to weaken due to cooler waters and becoming extra tropical. So definitely an intriguing situation. The GFS is kind of, at least with this run, favoring a more staying out to sea but more powerful trending system right here. So that's definitely something to watch. The 12Z I know is coming out. I want to see how that's starting to pump out real quickly. The 12Z, from what I am seeing, and it's taking a second to get its act together, but the 12Z, at least in terms of the model run, definitely showing maybe a tropical storm moving through parts of the MDR, similar to what we're seeing with the 0Z. The difference is, though, is this actually moves further to the west and potentially impacts parts of the Antilles, albeit it's a lot weaker and similar to what we saw with the European 0Z, as a matter of fact. So definitely a bit of a shift right here. I'm not sure if this is just one model doing this or if it's every single one heading that far to the west, because if that's the case, then if you're in the Antilles, you're going to want to watch out for this right here. Let's go ahead and see what else is going on. Let's go ahead and take a quick gander at the Canadian run. 12Z Canadian is starting to come out, so let's go ahead and show you this. Here's the 12Z Canadian organizing potentially tropical storm. Let's go ahead and see what's going on. It does make an impact for parts of the Antilles, as a matter of fact, as a tropical storm before moving through parts of the northeastern Caribbean, running into some wind shear, impacting parts of the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Puerto Rico, but ultimately remains a disorganized mess. So it's definitely been shifting a bit further to the south and a bit further to the west, as a matter of fact, from what we've seen. So that potentially puts more people in the line of fire. The trade-off is it's not going to be as strong as what we were potentially looking like. Here's what the icon is showing at the 12Z for you guys, showing some organization, kind of still staying a bit further up to the north at this current point in time, albeit the icon has it remaining relatively weak. It runs into the wind shear, starts to get out of that belt, and then it moves out to sea. So definitely am noticing a shift in the models. Some of them are keeping it out to sea. Some of them are moving closer towards the Antilles and closer towards land right here. The main question is that is this going to continue, or is this going to be a one-time thing and then start shifting back to the east? Because we're noticing, yes, it's been shifting and trending further to the west, but the main thing is this going to continue, or is it going to start backing off? I want to wait another day or so before we confirm anything, but ultimately it's not looking too good. If you are tuning in from parts of the Lesser Antilles, you might see some impacts from this. Trade-off, like I said in a couple of times in this video, is it's going to be a potentially weaker system as we continue to look at this and as we continue to monitor this. So with that being said, we're going to be looking at some conditions, and I want to kind of play with both scenarios right here to go, okay, we're seeing this split with the ensembles. We're seeing the operationals caving a bit further to the west. I want to know what both scenarios could look like and how things could pan out. And to start off with, here is our water temperatures that we have for you guys right here. We're going to go ahead and give you the latest frame. Water temperature where the system is currently at, plenty warm. Not disputing that. 27 to 28 degrees Celsius. That is going to continue all the way through at least the next 7 days. If it moves into parts of the Atlantic Basin, like we've seen with earlier trends and what we've seen with the the ensembles, then you're going to have more warm water. You're going to have a higher ceiling of water temperature potential right here as it moves through parts of those waters. You're looking at 29 to 30 degrees Celsius water temperatures across a lot of these areas as it starts shifting and starts curving further out to the north if it continues on that road. The main question is what's going to happen, if it's going to do that or not. If it moves into the Caribbean, cooler waters, at least in relative compared to what we're seeing with at least the Atlantic Basin, but you're still looking at about 28 to 29 degrees Celsius. The main problem with that is there's a lot of wind shear that the system's going to need to battle. So it's kind of a bit of a trade-off right here. The Atlantic Basin is actually the area where you want the warmer waters, where you want the better conditions for this system. If you are one of those weather enthusiasts that want to see a strong system out of this, you want this in the Atlantic Basin and you want this out to sea. If this is a situation where you see a lower ceiling with this, then this is going to be a scenario where it's basically the weaker scenario moves closer to land. That's kind of the trade-off that you get with this kind of thing. That's your water temperatures. OHC increases further as you shift further to the west as well. Where this is currently situated at about 25-ish OHC, but by the time you get to about, I'd say 45 degrees west, you start increasing that ocean heat content to about 75-ish or so, and then up to 100 as it moves closer to the Antilles. You have a situation here where if it stays far enough to the south, if it does enter the Antilles, if it stays far enough of this belt of shear over here, you could see a situation where briefly this could take advantage of the ocean heat content and maybe start strengthening a little bit more before its approach to the Caribbean. That said, the wind shear is the main thing that we need to pay attention to, especially later down the road. And let's go ahead and show you that, and as to a reason why. Here is our wind shear. Let's go ahead and go to the European. We're going to pull up the 0Z European just to kind of give you the furthest out that it can go. Here is what we have with our wind shear if this is willing to pop up right here. Perfect. So here is our wind shear with the system mainly concentrated to the north over here. You do see an opening of shear in the Eastern Caribbean. Do not expect this to last right here. It is starting to close off. You're starting to see the shear shifting further to the west as the European starts bringing that signal and that not that ensemble, but rather this system further to the west. You start seeing that belt starting to build back up, and the Caribbean starts rebuilding its shear, at least temporarily right here, as it starts moving closer to the Antilles. And then as we get to about 5 days out, at this current point, this is when the shear starts impacting it. So in order for the system to kind of get its act together and maybe be a bit stronger if it wants to impact the Antilles, it's gonna have to develop, I'd say, probably by either tomorrow or early Thursday. and then start ramping up in terms of its intensity as soon as it taps into the OHC, because it has good conditions to do that. The question is the system going to get its act together in time or not? And that's the main thing we need to watch out for. Personally, I don't really see the system developing until Thursday or Friday, mainly because it still has a long way to go. Yes, it's getting better organized, but it still has a long way to go. And time, yes, is on its side, and you can kind of understand why time is on its side. There's really not too much of a clock with this thing until it either moves towards the Atlantic Basin or moves out to sea. Now, if it moves towards the Atlantic Basin, this belt of wind shear does start to weaken and collapse a little bit. It starts to implode a little bit from what I've seen. If it starts moving into the Caribbean, yes, you might see a brief period of lower shear over here, but it does start to get reinforced as the system continues to move further to the west. Overall, the general shear across a lot of this does start to weaken a little bit, so I do find that kind of interesting. By the time this happens, though, this is about 9 days out, so we'll have to monitor that situation. But overall, short term, definitely good shear conditions for development. Long term, what it needs to do is it needs to get into the Atlantic Basin if it wants to be a stronger system, if it impacts the Antilles, if it moves further to the west, and we continue to see these model shifts further and further to the west, it's probably not going to tap into that power potential. The trade-off to that, though, is a lot more people do get impacted by this. So just something I wanted to preface right there. Let's go ahead and talk about the relative humidity, because the dry air aspect is also something I'm paying attention to. It's not as big of a wild card as what you would normally expect, especially in the MDR and an El Nino year, mainly because you have the wave in front of it producing moisture and the wave behind it producing moisture and keeping the system going, and that's expected to continue as long as there's low shear over the next 5 days. So that's what we're looking at in terms of your dry air aspect of it. A lot more moisture is being pumped into parts of the system over here as the system does get its act together and does its best to organize and develop right here. The dry air stays away from it. It's still in a very consolidated moisture pocket for the next 4 days at least, going into day 5 right here. Yeah, that's when that pocket does start to degrade a little bit due to the wind shear, but as long as the system can produce convection, it shouldn't be too bad of a scenario. But if it does run into the Caribbean right here, it does run into the dry air aspect, and that's part of the reason why you don't see that ceiling going as strong, because you're not seeing as much moisture, especially in the Atlantic Basin over here. And when you see this shear chipping away at the structure, especially if it remains a tropical storm, it's most likely not going to survive, at least if the shear is like, say, 30 to 40 knots and you're looking at a lot of dry air with it. You're not going to see a rather healthy tropical system that moves through this. So ultimately, we're looking at a trade-off of two worlds right here. On one hand, this system could impact a lot of people in the Lesser Antilles, and the model runs, especially recently, have reflected a bit closer to that. On the other hand, because of the shear and because of the dry air, it would remain around tropical storm strength. On the other hand, if, let's say, we start seeing systems shifting a bit further to the east and we start seeing those trends starting to go back to the east, you see a scenario where this system could move into the Atlantic Basin and be a stronger system overall. So that's kind of the trade-off you have with this. I want to wait another day or so to kind of confirm or deny my suspicions right here, but for now, we're going to keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. Feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.